Dust Creek was a quiet town, but its silence carried cruelty. At sunset, Clara, a widow, carried a heavy sack of flour past the saloon. Drunken men blocked her path, mocking her grief. Their laughter cut through the dusty street. Across the way, a cowboy leaned against a fence, hat pulled low, eyes steady. Nobody knew his name. Folks called him the Quiet Cowboy. Clara stumbled, the sack ripped and flour spilled like white snow over dirt. The cowboy's jaw tightened. He did not move yet, but inside him, something stirred, waiting to break like thunder. One man twisted Clara's wrist until she cried out. The cowboy's boots struck the ground, each step echoing like warning bells. Silence fell as he reached her. Slowly, he removed his hat and placed it on Clara's head. Gasps spread across the crowd, an unspoken vow of protection. A ranch hand sneered. But his smirk vanished when the cowboy struck, swift and clean. Dust flew as the man hit the ground. The others froze, realizing this silent stranger carried storms in his fists. Clara clutched the hat. For the first time, she felt the shadow of safety. The next morning, Clara found the cowboy repairing her broken fence. He didn't ask permission, didn't speak, just worked. Day after day he returned, hauling water, feeding cattle, chopping wood. Clara filled the silence with stories of her late husband, her fears and her lonely nights. He never interrupted, but his steady presence gave her strength. Sometimes she saw sorrow in his eyes, a reflection of her own grief. Dust Creek soon noticed, Clara was no longer alone. The men who once mocked her now kept their distance. The cowboy's silence had become her strongest shield. As days passed, Clara began to trust him. She shared meals with him on the porch, lantern light flickering between them. He spoke little, but his presence was steady, his protection certain. For the first time in months, Clara found herself laughing. The town whispered about the bond forming between widow and stranger. But trouble brewed. Briggs, the ruthless cattle baron, had already tried to scare Clara off her land. His men failed, and now he was coming himself. Fear haunted her nights, but when she looked at the cowboy, her courage returned. The storm struck under darkness. Flames consumed Clara's barn, smoke blackened the sky. Hooves thundered as Briggs's riders charged in. Clara screamed, but the cowboy was already there, rifle in hand, eyes calm and fierce. Shots cracked the night, each one controlled, forcing the attackers back. Through fire and smoke, Briggs himself appeared, pistol aimed at Clara. Before the bullet could fly, the cowboy stepped in front of her. For the first time, his voice broke the silence. "You'll have to go through me." The words hit harder than any bullet. The fight was swift but brutal. The cowboy moved like a storm, disarming men with precision, every shot measured. Panic spread, and Briggs' men fled into the night. Briggs charged in fury, but the cowboy met him head-on. In moments, Briggs fell humiliated, beaten before his men. Defeat burned brighter than the fire itself. The attackers scattered, leaving Clara safe but shaken. Dust Creek whispered of the stranger who defended a widow with silence, steel, and unshakable will. The Quiet Cowboy was no longer just a drifter. He was a legend in the making. Morning came, painting the horizon in gold. The ranch still smoked, but Clara's land was hers. The cowboy turned to leave, his task seemingly complete. Clara's hand caught his arm. "You don't have to go," she whispered. For the first time, he smiled. "Maybe I'll stay." Together they stood, watching the sun rise over the ranch. The silence between them was no longer loneliness. It was peace, strength, and something like love. Dust Creek had gained more than a tale. It had gained a legend, the Quiet Cowboy who gave a widow hope. The ranch became a battleground. Fire roared, smoke blinded, and gunshots cracked through the chaos. The cowboy fought like a storm, measured, relentless, unyielding. Briggs's men dropped their weapons, fleeing into the night. Briggs himself lunged at the cowboy, fury driving him forward. They clashed in the dirt, fists flying until the cowboy pinned him down. Beaten, humiliated, Briggs spat curses but couldn't rise. Silence fell except for the crackle of dying flames. Clara's ranch was scarred, but she was safe. Dust Creek would never forget the night a stranger became a shield. When the smoke cleared, the ranch was half in ruins. Clara wept over the ashes of her barn, but the cowboy stood beside her, steady as always. He began rebuilding at dawn, hammering wood, calming frightened livestock. His silence never wavered. For Clara, that silence no longer felt empty. It was strong, like the earth beneath her feet. Townsfolk came to watch, whispering about the quiet drifter who fought off Briggs. Some offered help, others only gossip. But the widow and the cowboy kept working side by side. Bonded by fire, forged in danger. Nights grew softer. Clara and the cowboy sat under starlight, sharing quiet meals. She spoke of her dreams, her late husband, her struggles. He listened, his silence filled with understanding. She longed to know his story, but he kept it buried. Still, trust bloomed between them like desert flowers after rain. Sometimes, when Clara laughed, the cowboy's lips curved into the faintest smile. It was small, but to her it was enough. Their bond was unspoken but unbreakable, a love language written in silence, sacrifice and presence. Nights grew softer. Clara and the cowboy sat under starlight, sharing quiet meals. She spoke of her dreams, her late husband, her struggles. He listened, his silence filled with understanding. She longed to know his story, but he kept it buried. Still, trust bloomed between them like desert flowers after rain. Sometimes, when Clara laughed, the cowboy's lips curved into the faintest smile. It was small, but to her it was enough. Their bond was unspoken but unbreakable, a love language written in silence, sacrifice and presence. But shadows don't vanish easily. Briggs wasn't finished. His pride wounded, he gathered more men, promising blood. Dust Creek trembled at the news. Clara felt fear rising again, but the cowboy remained steady. He spent days preparing, fortifying fences, checking weapons, and watching the horizon with calm patience. Clara tried to dissuade him, afraid she'd lose him too. He only tipped his hat, silent as ever. The storm was coming back, and this time it would take more than fists and fire to end it. The widow prayed, clutching his hat close to her chest. Dawn broke with thunderous hooves. Briggs and his riders stormed Clara's land again, determined to crush her once and for all. The cowboy stepped forward, rifle gleaming in morning light. Gunfire erupted, chaos consuming the ranch once more. But this time, Dust Creek's townsfolk joined the fight. Inspired by the cowboy's courage, they stood beside Clara, driving back Briggs's men. Surrounded, Briggs cursed, then fled into the hills, never to return. Victory was won not by one man's gun, but by one man's silent example. Dust Creek had found its backbone. When the dust finally settled, peace returned to Dust Creek. Clara's ranch stood bruised but alive. The cowboy prepared to leave, but Clara caught his arm. "Stay," she whispered. For the first time, he truly smiled. Together, they faced the sunrise. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was home. It was love. It was hope. Dust Creek would forever tell the tale of the quiet cowboy who protected a widow, not for glory but for honor. And in doing so, he became a legend. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe. More tales of courage, sacrifice, and love are waiting for you. Your support keeps these legends alive, one story at a time.